I spent one night with my best friend's father. One night that was never supposed to happen, never supposed to mean anything, never supposed to leave a mark. But 4 weeks later, I'm standing in a gas station bathroom, staring at two pink lines. And my new job contract is sitting in my bag with the name Kong Hyunwoo printed at the top. He's my boss. He's my best friend's father. He doesn't even remember my face. And I am carrying his PUPS. Before I tell you what happens next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers, and tell me where you're watching from. The fluorescent light above the sink had been flickering for what felt like an hour, though it had probably been 30 seconds. Everything felt longer in here. The smell of industrial cleaner and old tile grout. The distant sound of a truck pulling out of the station. The way my hands would not stop shaking. I dropped it the first time reaching for it off the edge of the sink. Fumbled it against the wall on the way down. The second time I dropped it, I just let it hit the floor and stood there with my back against the stall door, breathing through my mouth, staring at the ceiling until the flickering light felt like a countdown. Then I picked it up and looked at it properly. 2 lines. Both of them pink. Both of them certain in the way that only terrible things are ever truly certain. My work bag was slumped against the base of the toilet where I dropped it when I ran in here. The job offer contract had slipped halfway out. Face up, the company letterhead catching the stuttering light. Kim and Kong Architecture. Office of the CEO. I had read those words 3 days ago at my kitchen table with Seobin's voice still in my ear, bright and proud and completely, catastrophically oblivious. I had read them and felt nothing but relief. A good firm. A real start. Everything I had worked for since graduation folded into one clean contract. I looked at the test. I looked at the contract. And then I laughed, one short, broken sound that bounced off every hard surface in that bathroom and came back to me sounding like someone else entirely. For weeks ago, I made either the worst decision of my life or the best one. I still don't know which. What I do know is this. It started with a gala, a broken suppressant patch, and a man who smelled like cedar and midnight, and every warning I should have listened to. Seobin had called it the event of the year, which for Seobin meant he'd been texting me outfit options for 11 days straight. His father's company anniversary gala, Kim and Kong Architecture's 25th year. Held in the Grand Ritz Ballroom with 300 guests and enough ambient power in the room to make the air feel pressurized. I went as his +1, in a borrowed suit jacket that almost fit, feeling like exactly what I was. A 23-year-old junior architect who had no business being in the same room as any of these people. The suppressant patch gave out somewhere around the second hour. I didn't feel it happen. That's the cruelest part. There's no warning, no slow fade. One moment you are contained and invisible, and the next your omega scent is bleeding into the air around you like ink dropped in water. And every alpha within 20 feet is going to feel it before you do. I excused myself from Seobin mid-sentence and walked quickly, not running, never running, down a service corridor away from the main hall. Found a stretch of wall between 2 closed doors and pressed my back to it and focused on breathing slowly, the way my doctor had taught me years ago. Slow inhale. Hold. Slow exhale. You are not in danger. You are managing this. You look like you're managing this very poorly. The voice came from my left. I turned. He was standing about 4 feet away, holding a glass he hadn't touched, watching me with the particular stillness of a man who was used to reading rooms and had already read this one completely. Tall. Dark suit, no tie, collar open one button. The only concession to informality in an otherwise immovable presence. A face that looked like it had been built for serious weather. Sharp jaw, dark eyes, the kind of bone structure that made people assume authority before he'd said a single word. I felt his scent before I consciously registered it. Cedar and something darker underneath, clean smoke, and the distinct low-frequency warmth of alpha pheromones being managed. Deliberately calibrated. Not advancing, not retreating. Building a wall between me and the rest of the hallway. He was shielding me. A stranger, without being asked, was using his own scent to contain mine. I'm fine, I said, which was not true. You're not, he said, which was also not an accusation. Just a fact, delivered the way architects deliver structural assessments. This wall has a problem. Here's where the problem is. I'll be fine, I amended. My patch failed. It happens. I just need a few minutes. It's going to take longer than a few minutes. He glanced toward the end of the corridor, where the sound of the gala drifted. Laughter, glass, the low swell of a string quartet. There are 11 alphas in that room who will notice before you're ready. I can stay here, or I can find you somewhere private. Your choice. I should have said stay here. I should have managed it alone the way I always did, thanked him for the shield, waited him out, gone back to find Seobin and pleaded a headache. I said, somewhere private. His name was Kong Hyunwoo. He told me that in the elevator, quietly, like it was information rather than introduction. I told him mine. He nodded once and said nothing else until we reached the floor. The suite was private and cool, and he sat across the room from me the entire first hour, giving me space I hadn't asked for but desperately needed, and we talked about nothing important. Architecture. A project I'd submitted for a student award 2 years ago that had placed second. Whether the string quartet downstairs had been slightly flat on the cello all evening. He had a dry, unhurried way of speaking that made everything feel like the least urgent conversation in the world. And somewhere in the middle of it, the shaking in my hands stopped. The heat came anyway. Slow at first, then not slow at all. I won't narrate what happened next as though either of us was helpless. We weren't. There were several moments, I counted them afterward, standing in the shower at 4 a.m., where either of us could have stopped it. We didn't stop it. We chose, both of us, with full knowledge that the morning was going to be complicated and the night was borrowed and none of this belonged to us past sunrise. He fell asleep just before 4, one arm across my shoulders, his face finally, without that controlled stillness. He looked younger. He looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in years and had unexpectedly been given permission to stop. I lay there for 17 minutes watching him breathe. Then I got up. I found a hotel notepad on the desk and wrote, "Thank you for keeping me safe. I'm sorry I can't stay." I put it on the pillow. I picked up my bag. I left. I didn't look back. Looking back was not something I could afford to do. I looked at the contract again in that gas station bathroom, the fluorescent light still flickering overhead, the pregnancy test still in my hand. Kim and Kong Architecture. The Kong was Hyunwoo. I understood that now, had confirmed at the moment the nausea drove me into this bathroom, and I'd pulled up the firm's website on my phone with shaking hands and seen his photograph in the leadership section. CEO. Founder. The same dark eyes. The same carved face. Seobin had referred me. 3 weeks ago, before any of this, before I even knew, proud and excited and talking so fast I could barely follow him. Jaiwea, my dad's firm has a junior position opening. You have to apply. Your portfolio is exactly what they're looking for. Please just send the email. I had sent the email. I had interviewed. I had accepted the offer 3 days ago without knowing. Without knowing any of it. My phone buzzed against the tile floor. Seobin's name. A voice message. I pressed play because I was apparently not done being punished. His voice filled the bathroom, warm and oblivious, and so genuinely happy it made my chest crack clean down the middle. Jaiwea, guess what? I told my dad one of his new hires is my best friend, and he didn't even react. You know how he is. But that's fine, he'll come around, he always does. You start Monday. I'm going to bring you lunch on your first day. We're basically going to be family. The message ended. The bathroom went quiet. The light flickered once more and held. I looked at the test in my hand and the contract on the floor, and I thought, Seobin has absolutely no idea how right he is. The building was exactly what I expected from a firm that had spent 25 years becoming the most respected name in Korean architecture. All glass and clean angles, the kind of structure that announced its own excellence without bothering to be loud about it. I stood on the pavement outside for longer than was strictly professional, my bag on my shoulder, my suppressants fresh and correctly applied, my face arranged into something I hoped read as calm. Then I walked in. The lobby was marble and morning light. A receptionist smiled and handed me a visitor lanyard while I waited for HR. Around me, staff moved with the particular efficiency of people who had learned early that time in this building was not wasted. I counted 4 alphas in the first 10 minutes. All of them senior, all of them carrying the faint atmospheric weight that came with rank and habit. None of them looked twice at me. The suppressants were holding. I breathed slowly and counted that as a victory. Hyunwoo walked through the lobby at 9 minutes past 9. He was with 2 other men, one carrying a tablet, one speaking rapidly about a zoning approval that had come through overnight. Hyunwoo listened without turning his head, which somehow made it obvious he was processing every word. He was dressed the way powerful men dress when they have stopped trying to prove anything. Dark trousers, a gray shirt, no jacket yet this early. He looked like the building itself. Certain. Load-bearing. The HR manager introduced us. Mr. San, our newest junior architect. He comes highly recommended, and I understand he's a friend of your son's. Hyunwoo looked at me. I felt it the way you feel the moment before a wave hits. That suspended second where you know what's coming and cannot move. I looked back at him. I waited. Nothing. Not a flicker. Not a pause. Not the smallest contraction of muscle around his eyes that might have suggested even the ghost of familiarity. He looked at me the way he had probably looked at every junior hire for 25 years. Briefly, assessingly, and without particular interest. "Welcome to the firm," he said, and walked away. I stood there with the lanyard in my hand and something in my chest that I was not going to name in the lobby of my new workplace on my first day. He didn't remember my face. I remembered everything. By noon I had a clearer picture of who Kang Hyunwoo was in the building that bore his name, and it was nothing like the man who had sat across a hotel room from me and asked, in that quiet, unhurried way, whether I thought the cellist had been slightly flat all evening. Here he was precise to the point of severity. He moved through the office and the air pressure changed, not dramatically, not in the way of men who needed everyone to know they were in the room, but in the quieter way of someone whose standards were simply that high and had been for long enough that the entire organization had calibrated itself around them. I watched a senior architect present a site plan in a glass-walled meeting room and saw Hyunwoo find the problem in under 40 seconds. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He just pointed, said 3 words, and the architect nodded with the expression of someone who already knew. Staff walked carefully around him. Not in fear exactly, more in the way you walk carefully in a space where precision matters, where one misplaced thing changes the whole. I sat at my assigned desk and absorbed it and tried very hard not to compare him to the man who had built a scent barrier around me in a hotel corridor without being asked, who had talked about architecture and string quartets until my hands stopped shaking, whose face in sleep had looked like someone finally briefly safe. Maybe I had imagined that version of him. Maybe the gentleness had been circumstantial, a response to distress, professional even in its warmth. Maybe this, the glass and the precision and the 3-word corrections, was who he actually was and the rest had been the night talking. I was still thinking about it when my phone rang. "Tell me everything," Siobhan said before I could speak. "How is it? What's the office like? Have you met my dad yet? Did he do the thing where he looks at you like you're a structural problem he hasn't solved yet? He does that to everyone, don't take it personally. It's basically how he says hello." "It's fine," I said. "It's good. The office is, it's a good firm, Siobhan. Obviously it's a good firm. I referred you." I could hear the grin in it, bright and uncomplicated. "Listen, come for dinner tonight. Appa's out late, so it'll just be us. We can order from that Galby place, and you can tell me properly. Like family. The whole evening." There it was again. That word landing right in the center of my sternum with its full weight. "Maybe later in the week," I said. "First day. I want to stay and get through the orientation files tonight. You're the only person I know who does overtime on day 1. He sighed, fond and exasperated. "Fine. But you're calling me tonight, okay? I want to hear everything." I told him I would. I hung up. And then I sat very still for a moment because the morning sickness, which had been politely dormant since I arrived, had just decided that now was an excellent time to make its presence known. I made it to the bathroom with approximately 4 seconds to spare. Afterward, I sat on the floor of the stall for a while, back against the door, forehead on my knees, doing the breathing exercise my doctor had taught me years ago for different reasons. Slow inhale. Hold. Slow exhale. You are managing this. My mouth tasted like regret. The tiles were cold through my trousers. Someone knocked. "Hey, you okay in there?" A junior colleague. I recognized the voice from the morning orientation. "Something I ate," I said. Smooth and immediate and practiced already, which said something about me that I didn't want to examine. "I'm fine. Give me a minute. There's water at the kitchen station if you need it." "Thank you. I'm fine." I heard them leave. I waited 2 more minutes, then stood, rinsed my mouth at the sink, checked my reflection with the impersonal efficiency of someone conducting damage assessment after a minor incident. Presentable. Contained. Fine. I opened the bathroom door and nearly walked directly into Kang Hyunwoo. He was standing in the corridor, not blocking it, not waiting in any way that suggested intention, just present, the way he seemed to be present everywhere in this building, completely and without effort. He might have been passing. He might have stopped for any number of reasonable professional reasons. He didn't speak, but his nostrils moved. Barely. The smallest involuntary flare, the kind of thing you would miss if you weren't already watching for everything. And then something happened in his face. A single beat, so brief I almost dismissed it. A faint crease between his brows, something that lived between confusion and almost recognition. The expression of a man who has heard a piece of music he knows and cannot place. Then it closed. Completely, deliberately, like a door being pulled shut from the inside. He looked at me, through me, and walked away down the corridor without a single word. I stood outside the bathroom door until his footsteps had gone completely, and then I pressed my hand flat against the wall and stood there for a moment longer. I stayed late. The orientation files were real and genuinely needed finishing, which was fortunate because it meant my reason for staying was true enough that I could almost ignore the other reason, the one I wasn't looking at directly. The office emptied slowly, then quickly, then completely. The lights shifted to their after-hours setting, dimmer, quieter, the building settling into itself. I worked at my desk and told myself I was simply being thorough. Hyen's office was at the far end of the floor. I had not looked at it once all evening. I was not looking at it now. His door was slightly open. I noticed because light came through it when the rest of the floor was dim, warm, specific, the lamp he kept on his desk rather than the overhead. He was still here. Working late the same as always, probably, the man who had built this firm on 25 years of never leaving before the building did. His voice was low. He was on the phone. I could hear it without being able to make out words from my desk, just the controlled cadence of him, the measured intervals. I was not listening. I gathered my files. I put on my jacket. I walked toward the elevator, which required me to pass the corridor where his office sat. I was 2 feet from the door when his words resolved into clarity. Find the Omega from the Ritz Gala. A pause. His voice did not change in temperature or pace. I don't care how long it takes or what it costs. Find them. I stopped walking. I stood in the corridor outside his office door with my files pressed against my chest and the elevator button unlit 10 feet ahead of me. And I did not move for a long time. He was looking for me, had been looking for me for 4 weeks. And I was standing 20 feet away, with his pups growing inside me. And he had looked right through me that morning like I was a stranger. I had made it 4 days without incident, which in retrospect should have told me something. Good stretches and bad situations are never neutral. They are just the universe gathering itself before the next thing. Siobhan arrived at 11:43 on a Thursday with 4 bags of takeout and the specific energy of someone who had decided that other people's workplaces were simply extensions of his own living room. He came through the glass doors like weather, bright, warm, slightly too much for the space, and half the junior floor looked up from their screens before they could stop themselves. He had that quality. You noticed him the way you noticed sun coming through a window you'd forgotten was there. Sanjaiwu, he announced, finding me immediately across the room. You have been here 4 days, and you have not eaten lunch with me once. This is a betrayal. I brought Galbi. You can't just walk into a firm. I told the receptionist I was dropping off food for my best friend, and she smiled and buzzed me in, so apparently I can. He set the bags on the edge of my desk with complete confidence, and looked around the office with unguarded curiosity. This place is so intense. Does everyone always look this serious, or is it a Thursday thing? I was trying to formulate an answer that would get him off the floor as quickly as possible when the atmosphere in the room changed in the subtle, barometric way it always did when Hyunwoo appeared. No announcement. No shift in sound. Just a change in pressure, the way a room feels different when a load-bearing wall is suddenly visible. He came from the corridor toward the project wing, paused when he registered Siobhan standing at my desk. Something moved through his face. Not surprise exactly, more a brief recalibration. Siobhan, he said. I didn't know you were coming. Spontaneous visit, Siobhan said cheerfully. Jaiwoo hasn't been eating properly. I have evidence. I've been eating fine, I said, which was mostly untrue. Hyunwoo looked at me for exactly 1 professional second. The same flat assessment he gave every junior staff member, nothing in it, nothing behind it, and then back to his son. Don't keep him too long. He has a project review at 2. 1 hour, Appa. The world won't end. Siobhan said it lightly, the way you say things to parents when you have long since accepted the particular texture of your relationship with them. But Hyunwoo's mouth did something at Appa, the smallest compression, almost invisible. And then Siobhan laughed at something I hadn't caught, a Rayal laugh, sudden and unguarded, and for just a moment I watched Hyunwoo's face. Something moved through it, fast and uncontrolled, the way grief moves sometimes when it catches you off guard. Not sadness exactly, more like the shadow of a feeling that used to live where feeling had since been cemented over. His eyes on his son while Siobhan laughed, and in them, briefly, something that looked like longing. Then it was gone. Sealed. He nodded once at both of us and walked away. We ate on the rooftop, which Siobhan had also discovered entirely on his own, charming his way past the access door with what he described as reasonable persistence. The city stretched out below us in the noon light, and he unpacked the galbi with the focused generosity of someone for whom feeding people was a primary love language. I managed 3 bites. The twins were making their opinions about galbi known in a way that required significant internal negotiation. Siobhan talked while he ate, which was his natural state, and for a while it was easy, Familiar rhythms, old jokes, the comfortable shorthand of 6 years of friendship. Then he went quiet for a moment, the way he only did when something real was coming. My mom would have liked this building, he said. Not sad exactly. Settled, the way people sound when they have carried something long enough that it has found its weight. She was obsessed with architecture. Used to drag me to open houses just to look at the bones of things. He smiled down at his food. She died 6 years ago. Overseas humanitarian work. A clinic her foundation was building in a flood zone. There was a structural collapse. I set my chopsticks down. Siobhan, I'm sorry. You never. I don't talk about it much. He shrugged, but it was a careful shrug. Here's the thing, though. My dad was supposed to go instead of her. The foundation board wanted him. He was better connected, could get more press for the project. He pulled out 3 weeks before the trip. Some acquisition deal, he said, couldn't wait. He was quiet for a moment. The collapse happened on a Tuesday. He found out in a boardroom. The rooftop was very still. He's been punishing himself ever since, Siobhan said. Locked himself into work. Locked himself out of everything else. I've been grieving him while he's still standing right in front of me. He looked up finally, and his eyes were dry, but the effort of that was visible. I thought having him run the firm she loved was some kind of tribute. Now I think it might just be penance. I looked at my hands in my lap. Thought about 2 small shapes on an ultrasound screen. Thought about the man downstairs who had sat across a hotel room from me with his collar open and his face finally at rest. The face of someone who hadn't stopped moving long enough to feel anything in years and had, for one night, accidentally stopped. The twins were the children of a man still drowning in guilt he had decided he deserved. And I was sitting on this rooftop with his son, who had no idea, eating galbi I couldn't finish, thinking about how there was no version of this that didn't cost someone something enormous. On Friday morning, Hyenwa's assistant appeared at my desk with a printed memo and the specific neutrality of someone delivering information they have been told not to editorialize. I had been reassigned to the Buchan Mountain Development, Hyenwa's private project, a luxury residential commission that had been running for 8 months and was entering its most technically complex phase. The memo cited my university thesis and my handling of the orientation review files as the basis for the decision. It was professionally airtight. The reason was legitimate. I knew at the moment I read it because the project actually matched my portfolio in a way that was almost annoying, given the circumstances. Daily meetings. Small team. A project room that fit 5 people comfortably and felt significantly smaller by the second day. Hyunwoo ran the meetings with the same controlled precision he brought to everything. Structured, efficient, no wasted motion. He called me San the way he called everyone by their last name and asked questions about load distribution and window orientation that required actual answers, which was the only reason I could give them without my voice doing something unhelpful. Proximity was becoming a different kind of problem from the one I had anticipated. It wasn't that he looked at me differently in that room. It was that he didn't. And I was starting to understand that his absence of reaction required the same effort as the reaction itself. By the end of the first week, I had stopped being surprised when his scent reached me across the small table. I had not stopped reacting to it. The second Thursday. Everyone else had left by 7. I had stayed to finish a site elevation sketch that was due in the morning, and Hyunwoo had stayed because Hyunwoo apparently always stayed, because the building was his and leaving it was something he hadn't fully learned. We were on opposite sides of the project table, with the blueprints between us. He had been walking me through a retaining wall specification for the lower terrace, quiet, methodical, his finger moving along the drawn line, when he leaned across to indicate a junction point on my side of the plans. He stopped mid-sentence. He looked at me. Not at the blueprint. At me. 3 full seconds of silence in a room that was already very quiet, and his eyes in that silence were doing something they had not done in any meeting before. Not assessing, not professionally cataloging, but searching, the way his face had searched when he'd stood in the corridor outside the bathroom that first week. You smell different, he said, from the other Omegas in this office. My blood went cold from the inside out. I held his gaze because looking away would have been worse. Stress, I said. The word came out even. I was distantly proud of that. New job. I'm still adjusting. He looked at me for 1 beat past what comfort allowed. Then he returned to the blueprint. His finger found the junction point again. He continued the sentence he had stopped. But his jaw was tight for the rest of the meeting. And he did not lean across the table again. My bag was overfull. It had been all week, prenatal vitamins and crackers, and the particular accumulation of someone managing a secret in a confined space. When I stood to leave, it caught the edge of the table, and my phone skated off the top and hit the floor face up, screen lit. Hyunwoo was closer. He picked it up in one automatic motion, and his eyes caught the screen in the half-second before he could reasonably look away. Twins confirmed, 6 weeks gestation. Follow-up appointment Thursday, 10 a.m. He held it for one more second. Then he handed it back to me, screen down, face completely neutral. Said nothing. Gathered the blueprint on his side of the table and rolled it with the same deliberate efficiency as always. Good work tonight, he said. The elevation sketch. Leave it on my desk when it's done. He walked out. I stood at the project table holding my phone until I heard the elevator arrive for him. Then I collected my things and made it to the next elevator and pressed my back against the wall of it and stayed there while the floors dropped away beneath me. He saw it. I know he saw it. He has the face of a man who has spent decades learning to feel nothing in public. And tonight, for just 1 second, that face cracked. He knows. And his silence is the most terrifying thing I have ever heard. Before I tell you what happens next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers and tell me where you're watching from. The note arrived at 10 in the morning, delivered by Hyunwoo's assistant with the same expression she used for everything. Professional, pleasant, entirely unreadable. She set it on the edge of my desk without comment and walked away before I could ask anything, which suggested she had been instructed not to field questions. It was a small square of paper folded once. Cream stock, the kind that came in sets that cost more than my monthly transport budget. 3 lines in handwriting that was exactly what I would have predicted from him. Controlled, no flourishes, the letters evenly spaced as though the pen had known better than to waste his time. My office. 6 p.m. Lock the door behind you. KHW. I sat with it for 4 hours. I attended a site review meeting at 11 and contributed 3 technically coherent observations about drainage gradients, which I was unreasonably proud of given that the note was sitting in my jacket pocket the entire time, and I could feel it the way you feel a bruise when you press it. Specific, insistent. Impossible to forget. I ate half a rice ball at my desk at 1 o'clock because the twins required it, and I had run out of energy to negotiate with them. I finished the elevation sketch. I sent 2 emails. I looked at the clock approximately every 8 minutes from 2 onward. At 5:58 I gathered nothing, because there was nothing to gather, and walked to the end of the floor. The blinds were drawn. Every one of them, the full length of his glass-walled office, which faced the floor. I had never seen them closed before, not in 2 weeks. The room beyond was lit by the desk lamp only, which made the light warm and specific and somehow more enclosed than darkness would have been. Hyunwoo was behind his desk, hands folded on the surface in front of him, no papers, no open laptop, nothing between us. He watched me come in and sit down with the stillness of a man who had decided, well before 6 o'clock, exactly how this was going to go. I locked the door behind me as instructed. The click of it was very loud. He said nothing. I said nothing. 60 seconds passed in which the only sound was the building's ventilation system and the distant, muffled city, and I became aware that the silence was not accidental. He was giving it to me deliberately, the way you give someone space before a difficult thing, or the way a surgeon waits for anesthetic to take hold. I did not find it comforting. Then, congratulations are in order, I assume. I don't know what you mean, I said. It came out steadily. I was almost impressed with myself. He was not impressed at all. His expression didn't shift a degree, which told me he had anticipated the denial and had already moved past it. He opened the top drawer of his desk, removed a single printed document, slid it across the surface toward me with 2 fingers. The way you slide something to someone when you want them to understand that the conversation has already progressed beyond the point where this would be surprising. It was a security log. The Ritz-Carlton, dated 4 weeks ago. Guest access records, 3rd floor. His name. My name. Same elevator timestamp, 14 seconds apart. A private investigator's header at the top of the page, a case reference number, a date of compilation. I've had someone looking for you for 6 weeks, he said. You were here the entire time. I stared at the document. The paper was very white under the desk lamp. I thought about the gas station bathroom. I thought about the note I had left on a hotel pillow in the dark. I thought about standing in this building's lobby on my first morning watching him look directly at me and through me in the same motion, and the particular quality of that nothing, and how I had spent 2 weeks deciding it meant I had imagined everything. I can explain, I started, which was not true. There was no explanation, only facts, and the facts were catastrophic. You don't need to explain the timeline, he said. I have the timeline. What I'm asking you to confirm is the information on your phone screen last Thursday. Something gave way. I don't know how else to describe it. Some structural thing I had been holding in compression since the gas station bathroom. Since before that, Since the morning I had calculated the dates and understood what the nausea meant and sat on my bathroom floor for 40 minutes unable to move. It gave way all at once, and what came out wasn't clean or organized or anything I would have chosen. I don't know what you want from me. My voice was not steady anymore. I don't know what you think is going to happen here. Siobhan is my best friend. He is the closest thing I have to family, and he referred me to this firm, and he has no idea. He has no idea. And you are his father. You are his father. And these pups are going to destroy everything the moment anyone finds out. So whatever you're about to say. Jaiwoo, whatever responsible thing you think you're going to do, it doesn't fix any of it. It doesn't make any of it simpler. It just adds more damage to something that is already. Jaiwoo, already impossible. So if this meeting was to confirm that yes, I am carrying your pups. Yes, I know what that means. Yes, I have been sitting 20 feet away from you for 2 weeks knowing exactly what that means. My voice broke on the last word. I pressed my hand flat on the desk surface and breathed. Then yes. Confirmed. Now you know. The silence that followed was different from the first one. Softer at the edges. I looked up because I couldn't not look up, and Hyunwoo had not moved from his chair, had not leaned forward, had not changed his posture, had done nothing except watch me come apart across his desk with an expression I was completely unprepared for. It looked like relief. Quiet, private, the kind that doesn't announce itself. The relief of a man who has been carrying a question for 6 weeks and has finally, at significant cost to someone else, received his answer. It looked like the face he'd had in sleep. It looked like something he hadn't meant to show. He let me catch my breath. Then he said, I'm not asking you to destroy anything. I'm asking you to let me be responsible for what I helped create. You don't even know me. I know you left a note instead of vanishing. He said it simply, as though he had thought about this specific thing many times and had arrived at certainty through repetition. I know you took this job even when you were terrified of what it meant. I know you have been sitting in this building for 2 weeks protecting everyone in it. My son, my staff, me. Accept yourself. A pause. And I know the pups are mine. I'm not walking away from that. I opened my mouth. Closed it. The thing I had been carrying alone for 4 weeks, the full weight of it, sat between us on the desk like the document he had slid across it. Visible now, undeniable, existing in a shared space for the first time. I don't know how to do this, I said, and it was the most honest thing I had said in a month. Neither do I, he said. But I'd like to try. If you'll let me. The office door swung open. It hit the doorstop with a sound like punctuation, and Siobhan stood in the frame, for takeout bags distributed between both hands, grinning with the specific brightness of someone who had decided to surprise 2 people he loved and was enormously pleased with himself about it. Okay, so I know you said overtime again, but I thought. He stopped. The grin didn't fade gradually. It simply stopped, the way a light stops when a switch is cut. His eyes moved from me to his father, then back, then to the drawn blinds, then to the document on the desk between us that he couldn't read from there, but could clearly tell was not a blueprint. The takeout bags were still in his hands. He had not moved from the doorway. Why do you both look like that? Siobhan set the takeout bags on the desk. He did it carefully, which was how I knew something had already shifted in him. Siobhan was not a careful person with physical objects. He was a person who put things down wherever there was space and trusted the surface to manage the rest. The deliberateness of it, the way he made sure each bag was settled before he let go, told me he needed something to do with his hands while he decided what to do with everything else. He sat in the chair beside mine, not across from us, beside me, which might have been instinct or might have been the last automatic gesture of 6 years of friendship before he knew whether he still had access to it. He looked at his own hands in his lap. Then he looked up, and his face was very still in a way Siobhan's face almost never was. He didn't speak. He waited. Hyunwoo looked at me from across the desk. The expression was unreadable to anyone who didn't know to look for the small things, but I had spent 2 weeks learning to look for the small things. And what it said was, your choice, your pace, that he would not do this for me. He would not take the decision out of my hands a second time. I looked at my best friend sitting very still in the chair beside mine, and I thought about every version of this conversation I had rehearsed in the shower at 4 in the morning over the past 2 weeks, and I understood that none of them were going to be useful now because Siobhan was already here, already waiting, already somewhere past the point where a careful version would land. It started at the gala, I said. Your father's anniversary event. 6 weeks ago. I told it from the beginning. The suppressant patch failing. The corridor. The man who had built a scent barrier around me without being asked and talked about architecture until my hands stopped shaking. I did not soften the timeline or suggest that it had been complicated in ways that made the choice less of a choice. It had been a choice, made by both of us, and Siobhan deserved the truth of that more than he deserved a version that protected me. I watched him move through it in real time. Confusion first, the slight tilt of his head, the frown of someone trying to fit information into a frame that doesn't yet exist. Then understanding arriving in pieces, each one visibly landing. The gala, the suppressants, the hotel. His eyes moved to his father once, briefly, during this part, and Hyunwoo held the look without flinching and without offering anything to make it easier. Then the disbelief, not that it had happened, but that it had been happening, specifically, while Siobhan had been calling me to ask how my first day went and texting me Galby options and saying the word family without knowing it was a grenade. I told him about the job offer, about not knowing the connection until the gas station bathroom, about 2 weeks of sitting 20 feet from his father carrying a secret that belonged to both of them. Then the pregnancy. Then the twins. Siobhan went quiet. Not the quiet of someone gathering toward an explosion. The other kind, the deeper kind, the quiet that means something structural has shifted, and the person is standing very still trying to determine if the floor is still load-bearing. When he spoke, his voice was low and even and cost him something to keep that way. You were the one person I told everything to about my dad. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the middle distance somewhere between us, where the words were easier to place. About how lonely he was. About how I wished he'd find someone. About how I'd been grieving him while he was still standing right there. A pause. And all this time. Siobhan. You should have told me, Jaiwoo. He looked at me then, and what was in his eyes was not anger. It was the specific grief that only best friends can produce in each other. The kind that comes from the distance between who you thought someone was and who the situation revealed them to be. Not because I would have stopped it. I don't even know if I could have. But because I deserved to know. I didn't have an answer for that. There wasn't one. He was right in the way that the most painful things are right, completely, without exit. He stood, picked up his jacket from the back of the chair with the same careful deliberateness he'd used with the takeout bags. He did not look at his father. He did not slam anything, did not raise his voice, did not give me the release of an explosion I could have pushed back against. He walked to the office door and opened it and went through it, and the door clicked shut behind him with a sound so soft it was almost courteous. The room was very quiet. I picked up my phone, opened the Notes app because I couldn't find a drafting template fast enough, and it didn't matter. The words didn't require formatting. I am writing to formally resign from my position at Kim and Kong Architecture, effective immediately, with sincere apologies for the disruption this causes to the Buchan Mountain Development team. I got that far before Hyunwoo stood up. He didn't cross the room quickly. He moved to stand between me and the door with the same unhurried certainty he brought to everything, and he was not blocking me. He was simply there, present, the way a wall is present, not hostile but immovable. I'm a liability to this firm, I said. I'm a liability to Siobhan and to you and too. You're a person making a decision in the worst possible moment of a very bad evening. He said it quietly. That's not the same thing. Hyunwoo. Running doesn't protect them. His eyes dropped briefly, just once, just for a moment, to somewhere below my face, and then back up. It only means you're running alone. I stared at him. The resignation letter sat unfinished in my Notes app. My thumb was still on the screen. Give it tonight, he said. That's all I'm asking. Give it one night before you make a decision you can't undo. I didn't put the phone away. But I didn't finish the letter either. The door opened without a knock. He was silver-haired and immaculately dressed in the way that old money dresses. Not expensively, exactly, but with the specific quietness of someone who has never needed clothing to announce them. He carried age the way certain buildings carry history. It had not diminished him. It had simply made him more concentrated. He walked into Hyunwoo's office as though the concept of an unannounced entrance did not apply to him, which, by every visible metric, it didn't. Chairman Yoon Jae-sung. I knew his face from the firm's historical photographs. The ones lining the entrance corridor marking the company's partnerships over 25 years. Hyunwoo's late wife's father. The man who had built the Yoon Foundation and then watched his daughter carry it forward until she couldn't anymore. He placed a folder on Hyunwoo's desk without preamble and opened it to a single printed profile. A photograph, a family name, a brief summary of lineage and designation. Young. Female. Omega. She's appropriate, Hyunwoo, he said. It's been long enough. Hyunwoo said nothing. His face was the controlled surface it always was, but something underneath it had gone very still. Chairman Yoon's eyes moved then, the way powerful people's eyes move in rooms. A full assessment, unhurried, missing nothing. They found me standing near the window where I had backed myself when the door opened. He looked at me with the particular focus of someone conducting an inventory. Then his gaze dropped. Just briefly. Just once. To somewhere below my face. The older generation of alphas. The ones who had grown up before suppressants were standard, before privacy around designation became cultural expectation, could read a pregnancy scent shift the way others read body language. It was not something they learned. It was something they simply knew. Chairman Yoon's face did not change. Not a muscle. He looked back at Hyunwoo with the same composed expression he'd entered with, said nothing further about the profile on the desk or the Omega standing by the window, and moved on to discuss the Foundation's quarterly review as though I were furniture. I left when there was a natural pause. Nobody stopped me. Nobody looked up. The elevator was empty. I pressed the lobby button and stood with my back against the wall the way I had been standing against walls in this building for 2 weeks, and I watched the numbers descend. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text 3 lines. I know what you're carrying, and I know whose they are. You have 2 weeks to handle this quietly before I do it for you. YJS. I read it twice. Then I looked up at my own reflection in the elevator's brushed steel doors. Pale, hollow-eyed, one hand pressed flat against my stomach without having decided to put it there. Chairman Yoon had my number, and he was not making a request. Seobin's last text to me had been sent at 4 in the afternoon. A single punctuation mark, a period, which from Seobin was its own kind of statement. He never used periods. He was a person of exclamation points and ellipses, and the occasional string of letters that weren't words but communicated perfectly. A period meant he had typed something real and deleted it and sent the punctuation instead, because it was the only part he was sure of. I had replied 3 times since then. He had not responded to any of them. The apartment felt the way apartments feel when they've had people in them regularly and then don't. Slightly too quiet, the silence with a texture to it. I had lived here alone since graduation, and it had never bothered me before. I sat on the bathroom floor because that had become the room where I was most honest with myself, some Pavlovian thing established in a gas station 4 weeks ago that I hadn't been able to shake. The ultrasound photo was in my jacket pocket. I had been carrying it there since Thursday's appointment, folded once, because putting it anywhere else felt wrong in a way I hadn't examined. I took it out and unfolded it and looked at it in the bathroom light. 2 small shapes, both of them curved like questions, both of them already taking up more space in my life than anything that size had a right to. I had not cried yet. Not properly. I had performed the controlled breathing and the practical management and the professional composure for 6 weeks, and I had been so focused on the structural integrity of the whole situation that I had not once sat with the actual fact of it. That there were 2 of them, that they were real, that they were mine and also someone else's, and that I was 23 years old sitting on a bathroom floor alone at 11:45 at night with an ultrasound photo and an unanswered text chain and a threatening message from a man I had met once. The crying, when it came, was not graceful. It was the kind that builds pressure before it releases, that takes you by surprise even when you've been holding it for weeks, that doesn't have a clean end. It just runs until it runs out, leaving you wrung out and oddly lighter. The way buildings feel after significant structural load has been redistributed. I was on the floor with my back against the bathtub, and my knees pulled up when the knock came at 11:58. He was standing in the hallway holding 2 grocery bags, one in each hand, wearing a coat he hadn't bothered to button over what looked like the clothes he'd left the office in. The bags were plain, the kind from the 24-hour mart 2 blocks away. He looked, for the first time since I had known him, faintly uncertain, in the specific way of someone who has made a decision with complete conviction and is only now, standing at the execution point, considering that it might read as unusual. I stared at him. He looked at my face, at whatever the last hour had left on it, and something in his expression adjusted. Quiet, immediate, private. You didn't eat today, he said. I had the office kitchen checked. You had the kitchen. Let me in, Jaiwoo. It was not a demand. It wasn't quite a request either. It was something in between, the way he said most things, occupying the space where other people put uncertainty. I stepped back from the door. He cooked badly. This was immediately apparent, and he showed no awareness of it whatsoever, which was somehow the most disarming thing he had done yet. He moved through my small kitchen with the same focused competence he brought to architectural reviews, applied to processes that clearly had not been part of his routine in some time. He burned the first edge of the egg and adjusted without comment. He could not find the lid for the pot and spent 45 seconds looking before accepting that it did not exist. He plated everything with more care than the results warranted, which made it look simultaneously better and worse. We ate on the floor because my table was covered in blueprints, Buchan Mountain elevations I had brought home 3 days ago and not moved since. He sat across from me with his plate on the floor between us and ate what he had made without complaint, which suggested either very low standards or very good manners. And I ate more than I had eaten at any point in the past week because the twins, apparently, had opinions about egg rice that superseded all of my ongoing crises. He didn't mention Chairman Yoon. Didn't ask about Seobin. Didn't introduce timelines or decisions or any of the enormous unresolved architecture of the situation. He just stayed. Refilled my water glass when it was empty. Moved a blueprint off the floor when it was in the way. Sat in my apartment at midnight like a man who had decided this was where he was supposed to be and saw no reason to justify it further. I didn't know if he knew about the text. I didn't ask. At 2 a.m, I said, "Why are you doing this?" He was quiet for long enough that I thought he might not answer. Not evasively, but in the way he was sometimes quiet before saying something he had considered carefully. "Because that night," he said, "I felt something I had buried 6 years ago and told myself was gone forever. And then you were gone. And I spent 6 weeks thinking I had imagined you. You looked right through me at the office. I didn't recognize your face." He said it plainly, without apology, which somehow made it easier to hear than a softened version would have been. "But when you got sick in that hallway the first week, I felt it before I understood it. My alpha recognized you before I did." He looked at me directly. "I didn't imagine you. And I'm not letting you disappear again." The apartment was very quiet. Outside, the city did its late-night thing. A distant siren, the sound of the convenience mart's door 2 floors down. The particular silence that sits between sounds at 2 a.m. and has a different quality from any other hour's silence. "That's not an answer," I said. "Not a complete one." "No," he agreed. "But it's the true part. The rest," he stopped. Looked at his hands. Then back at me. "The rest I'd rather show you than explain." The space between us had been shrinking in increments since he sat down, the way distances change when two people stop actively maintaining them. He reached up slowly, deliberately, telegraphing every movement the way you move around something you don't want to startle, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers didn't linger. They didn't need to. Neither of us breathed. My phone rang. Seobin. 2:07 a.m. I looked at the screen. Looked at Hyunwoo. The moment between us held its shape for one more second, and then settled into something else. Not gone, just set aside carefully, the way you set aside something you intend to return to. Hyunwoo nodded once. Stood without being asked and moved to the kitchen, running water, finding mugs, giving me the room the way he seemed to understand, without instruction, that I needed it. "I've been sitting outside your building for an hour," Seobin said when I answered. His voice was thick in the specific way of someone who has been crying in a car alone, and is not going to mention it. "Can I come up?" "Yes," I said. "Come up." He came through the door looking like the night had worked him over thoroughly, red-eyed, hood up, shoulders carrying the particular exhaustion of someone who has been thinking very hard about something that resists resolution. He stepped inside and stopped. His father was standing at my kitchen counter in his shirt sleeves, a dish towel over one shoulder, filling 3 mugs with the focused attention of a man who had decided that tea was the most important thing happening in the room and intended to execute it correctly. The silence stretched. Seobin looked at his father. Hyunwoo turned, met his son's eyes, and waited. "You came here too," Seobin said. "Yes." Seobin closed his eyes. Something moved through his face, complex, unresolved, arriving at no clean conclusion. He opened his eyes. "I don't know if I'm angry that you're here," he said quietly, or relieved that he's not alone. A pause. "I think I'm both." Hyunwoo crossed the room and handed him a mug. Seobin took it. He came and sat on the floor beside me. Close enough that our shoulders touched, the way we had sat through every difficult thing in 6 years of friendship. And his father brought the remaining 2 mugs and sat across from us, and the 3 of us existed in my small apartment at 2 a.m. with the blueprints on the floor and the city quiet outside. Then Seobin looked at his father. His jaw was set. His eyes were clear. "I need you to tell me the truth, Appa." His voice did not waver. "Not the version that protects me. Not the version that's easy. The actual truth." He held his father's gaze. "Do you love him?" Hyunwoo looked at his son. Then he looked at me. Then back at Seobin. He didn't hesitate. "Before I tell you what happens next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers and tell me where you're watching from." The article went up at 6:43 in the morning. I know the exact time because my phone was already in my hand when the notification came through. I had been awake since 5, lying in the guest room of Hyunwoo's estate with the city sounds replaced by wind through pine trees and the particular silence of a house that was large enough to have its own acoustics. I had been watching the ceiling and thinking about Chairman Yoon's 2-week deadline, which had now become a 10-day deadline, which had the quality of a countdown I could feel but not stop. The notification was from an entertainment news aggregator I had never followed and couldn't explain being subscribed to. The headline read, CEO Kang Hyunwoo, office romance or scandal. Sources claim new junior hire is carrying his child. I sat up, read it twice, then read the article itself, which took 40 seconds because it was not long. It didn't need to be. The details were specific in the way that only insider information is specific. The timing of the hire, the project reassignment, the age gap characterized as significant, the designation of the unnamed party confirmed by sources close to the firm. My name was not in it. Everything else was. I sat on the edge of the guest bed in the early morning light and thought about two possibilities. Someone inside the firm had talked, or Chairman Yoon's 2 weeks had been a courtesy he'd decided not to extend. The deadline, it turned out, had been decorative. I got to the office at 8:50. The story had been live for 2 hours and 10 minutes by then, which in the current media cycle was enough time for it to have moved from entertainment news to architecture industry feeds to 3 separate group chats that I discovered upon arrival because the junior floor's energy told me everything before I reached my desk. The room didn't go silent. That would have been easier. Silence has clear edges. You can walk through it and out the other side. What the room did instead was go careful, which is a different and more sustained thing. Conversations that had been happening at normal volume dropped by 30%. Eye contact was made and immediately redirected. People who had greeted me every morning for 2 weeks found reasons to look at their screens as I passed. The ones who did meet my eyes did so with expressions that tried to be neutral and landed somewhere between sympathy and calculation, which told me they had already decided something and were waiting to see if it would be confirmed. I sat at my desk, opened my project files, stared at them. At 9 o'clock exactly, a notification came through on the company internal system. All staff flagged urgent, from Hyunwoo's assistant, but formatted in a way that made clear immediately that she had not written it. The language was too spare, too direct. No softening architecture, no corporate buffer language, none of the careful phrasing that communications departments put between executives and their actual opinions. He had written it himself. The information reported is accurate. I take full responsibility and complete pride in it. Further details will be addressed at the appropriate time and on our terms. Kang Hyunwoo CEO. 1 paragraph. No apology. No conditional phrasing. No we are looking into or it would be inappropriate to comment at this time. Just the facts stated plainly and claimed completely, in a single sentence that made the story's framing, scandal, look like a category error. I read it at my desk and did not move for 3 full minutes. Around me the office was recalibrating in real time, the careful energy shifting into something else, not quite resolved but differently oriented, the way a room changes when someone has decided the terms of engagement and the rest of the room understands that the decision has been made by someone with the standing to make it. I thought about Hyunwoo sitting in his office at whatever hour, writing 1 paragraph with the same focused economy he brought to structural specifications, and then sending it without apparent hesitation. Complete pride. Not acceptance, not acknowledgement. Pride. I thought about what it cost to use that word in a statement that would be read by every person in his professional world, and I thought about it for a long time after the 3 minutes were up. Seobin called me at 10:47. He skipped hello. A journalist just contacted me, he said. From one of the culture pages. Wanted a quote about my father, and, he said, my best friend. He already knew who you were, Jaiwoo. He just wanted me to confirm it. I closed my eyes. Seobin, I'm not calling to tell you I'm upset. I'm calling to tell you what I said. A brief pause, and I heard him exhale once, steadying. I told him my father is the finest man I know, Jaiwoo is my family, and that's all he was getting from me. Then I hung up. The relief was so sudden it felt physical. Seobin. Don't. His voice was not unkind. It was the voice of someone who has been up most of the night arriving at something, and is not ready to be thanked for it yet. I'm still processing. I'm allowed to still be processing. You're allowed, I said. He hung up. 7 seconds later my phone buzzed with a text from his number. 1 word. Family. I sat with it for a moment. That word, the one that had been landing on me like a weight for weeks, the one that Seobin had been using without knowing what it cost me to hear it. It landed differently now. Not lighter exactly. More honest. The lunch was at a private room in a restaurant that did not have a sign outside, which was a specific kind of statement about the people who ate there. Hyunwoo told me about it that evening. Not in detail, but enough. Chairman Yoon had been precise, as he was in everything. A folder, a document, a a figure representing the Yoon Foundation's annual partnership value with Kim and Kong, which was not a small figure. The terms were clean. Pull back publicly. Sign a document confirming financial support for the PUPS only. No relationship acknowledged. No shared name on any public record. This is business, Hyunwoo, Chairman Yoon had apparently said. Not punishment. Protect what my daughter built with you. Hyunwoo told me this standing in the estate kitchen while I sat on the counter, and he delivered it with the factual evenness of a man reading back a meeting's minutes. Then he said, I signed nothing, in exactly the same tone, and moved on to whether I had eaten dinner. He arrived at my apartment at 7 without calling ahead. When I opened the door, he looked at me with the brief assessing look I had come to understand meant he had already decided what needed to happen, and was now checking whether I was in a condition to hear it stated plainly. Pack a bag, he said. You're not staying here alone while this is happening. I'm not running to your estate to hide. Not to hide. He said it without impatience, without the quality of someone correcting a misunderstanding they find frustrating. Just the correction itself, offered plainly. To stop being alone in this. There's a difference. I looked at him for a moment. Then I went to pack a bag. I was folding a second sweater when my phone rang. My mother's number, which I had been anticipating and dreading in equal measure since 6:43 that morning. She was not a person who called without information. She was a person who read things thoroughly and then called with the specific item she needed answered. I'm on the train, she said before I could speak. I saw the article. I've been on the train for 2 hours. Her voice was steady in the way that meant she was working to keep it that way. I'm not calling to yell at you. I'm calling because I need to know one thing before I arrive. I looked up. Hyunwoo was standing in the bedroom doorway, leaning against the frame, watching me with the quiet attention he gave to things that mattered. Tell me his name, Jaewia. I held my mother's voice in one ear and looked at the man in my doorway. At the statement he had sent to an entire company without hedging a single word. At the grocery bags and the burned egg rice and the 2 a.m. tea and the way he had stood between me and a door and said running doesn't protect them. Kong Hyunwoo, I said. The silence on the line was long enough that I pulled the phone from my ear to check the connection. Still live. Seobin's father. Yes, Iyama. The line went completely quiet. Not dropped. I could hear the faint ambient sound of a train in motion, the white noise of distance being crossed. My mother, on a train from Busan, sitting with the name I had just given her and whatever it meant to her to hold it. Hyunwoo hadn't moved from the doorway. He was watching my face, reading it the way he read buildings, looking for where the weight was sitting, where the structure needed support. The train moved. My mother said nothing, and I stood in the middle of a half-packed room and waited for the world to decide what came next. Hyunwoo chose the estate deliberately. He didn't say so, but I understood it the way I had learned to understand most of his decisions. Not from explanation, but from the precision of the choice itself. Neutral ground didn't exist for a situation like this one, so he had chosen controlled ground instead. His territory, his house, his staff quietly preparing the main sitting room with tea and a level of ambient order that said this household is not in crisis even while everything in it was. My mother arrived first. She had taken the earliest train that connected and arrived at the estate gate with a single travel bag and the expression of a woman who has spent 4 hours on a train converting anxiety into resolve. She was small. I had always been taller than her, since I was 15, with the kind of quiet that people mistake for softness until they are in a room with her long enough to understand it is actually precision. She looked at the estate the way she looked at everything new, thoroughly once, and then she was done with the exterior and interested only in the interior. She hugged me for a long time without speaking. When she pulled back, she looked at my face with the specific attention of someone reading damage assessment, then nodded once, not at me, at herself, some internal conclusion, and went inside. Seobin arrived 20 minutes later. Vibrating with nervous energy, he was managing through productivity, which meant he had located the kitchen within 4 minutes and was making tea for everyone before he had properly said hello. I could hear him from the sitting room, opening cabinets, asking the housekeeper where the honey was kept, filling the space with the particular warm noise of someone who needed to be useful and had found the most immediate available form of it. Chairman Yoon arrived last. He had not been invited. He walked through the front door, which the staff opened because he was Chairman Yoon and the staff had been trained to read rooms, and settled into the sitting room's best chair with the unhurried composure of a man who had never needed an invitation to anything. He waited until the tea was distributed. Then he placed both hands on his knees, looked at my mother with the measured courtesy of his generation, and began. Your son is talented, he said. I have no quarrel with him personally. But there is a right way to manage a situation like this and a wrong way. And at the moment this family is moving very quickly toward the wrong way, and I think as his mother you would want. My mother set her teacup down. She did it without particular force, but the sound was precise, and it stopped Chairman Yoon in the middle of his sentence with the efficiency of a hand raised. My son, she said pleasantly, doesn't manage situations. He lives his life. She looked at Chairman Yoon with the expression she used when she had already decided something, and was extending professional courtesy to the other party by letting them finish. And I'd like to meet the man he chose to live it with before I hear another word from anyone else in this room. She turned to Hyunwoo. What followed was one of the more uncomfortable 30 seconds of my life. My mother looked at Hyunwoo the way mothers look at people who have touched their children. Not hostile, not warm, simply thorough, the way you examine something structural when you need to know if it will hold. Hyunwoo, to his considerable credit, held it. Didn't shift, didn't offer explanation, didn't perform anything. He simply let her look. Then my mother said, "Are you going to make my son cry?" And Hyunwoo said, without any pause at all, "He's already made me cry twice. I expect we'll be even." I looked at the floor. I looked at it for quite a long time. When I looked up, my mother was studying Hyunwoo with a slightly different expression. Not resolved, not approving, but recalibrated. She picked her teacup back up. That, for my mother, was movement. Seobin appeared in the doorway while Chairman Yoon was making his third attempt to reintroduce the conversation about optics, and found that my mother had redirected it, again, toward the practical question of where I would be living after the PUPS arrived, which was not the conversation Chairman Yoon had come to have, but which he was now somehow in. Seobin caught my eye across the room, jerked his head toward the hallway, and disappeared. A moment later I heard him say, quietly, "Appa. Study. Come on." I didn't follow. That conversation was not mine. What I know of it I know from what Seobin told me later, sitting on the estate steps in the dark, pulling his sleeves over his hands the way he did when he was trying to be composed about something that resisted it. He had told his father that he didn't need him to have been okay. He had needed to see that he wasn't. 6 years of a father who was present in every logistical sense and unreachable in every other. At the dinner table, at graduations, at the end of every phone call that lasted exactly as long as it needed to and no longer. Grief as performance of functionality. Seobin, 17 years old, learning to not bring things to a man who had run out of room for them. Hyunwoo had said he was trying to protect him. Seobin had said, "You were hiding. There's a difference." And then, because Seobin was who he was, generous in ways that cost him something, always. "I know you failed me. I'm not arguing that. I'm telling you I don't need the years back. I just need you to stop disappearing. I'm here. I know." A pause. "I see you." Chairman Yoon left at 4. He had said everything he came to say and achieved. As far as I could tell, none of it. He stood, buttoned his jacket, exchanged formal courtesies with my mother, who received them with equal formality and zero warmth. At the door he stopped, turned back. His eyes found me across the room and held for a moment. The same inventory look from the office, but something underneath it now that hadn't been there before, something older and less controlled. "My daughter would have liked you," he said. His voice was even. She always said Hyunwoo needed someone who didn't need him. He left. The door closed behind him. No one spoke for a moment. That was as close to a blessing as he had, and everyone in the room understood it. And we all let it sit. The evening settled. My mother and Seobin were inside. I could hear them through the sitting room window, the register of their voices without the words, an improbable domestic sound. I was on the garden path, where the light had gone gold, and then amber, and was now the particular deep blue that comes just before dark. I heard his footsteps on the path behind me. I didn't turn. He was empty-handed. "I don't have the ring yet," he said. I didn't want to do this under pressure, surrounded by chaos. "Not like this, except," he stopped. Looked at his hands briefly, then back up. "Except I find I can't wait for a better moment, because there may not be one, and I'm done letting good things pass because the timing is imperfect." "Then what are you doing?" "Promising." The word came out simply, the way all his truest things did. "That I am not going anywhere. That these pups will know their father chose them before they took their first breath. That you will never be alone in this again." He looked up. "I am asking you to let me try. That's all. Just let me try." The garden was very still. Somewhere inside, I could hear Seobin laughing at something my mother had said. There are moments in a life that split everything into before and after. I felt it the night I left that note on a hotel pillow in the dark. I felt it when I saw 2 pink lines in a gas station bathroom. And I felt it now in a garden at dusk, looking at a man on his knees asking nothing more than the chance to try. I opened my mouth. I said, yes, I said. That is what I said in the garden at dusk with my hands cupping his face and the last light going blue around us, and his eyes holding mine with an expression that had nothing managed in it, nothing controlled, nothing that had been prepared in advance. Just him completely asking for the chance to try. Yes. And then again, because once wasn't enough for something that had been 8 weeks in the arriving. Yes. 8 months later, the estate garden held a different kind of light. Morning, pale gold, the kind that comes before the day has committed to itself, soft-edged and unhurried, arriving through the old trees the way it must have arrived for decades before any of us were here to notice it. Jiho made a sound from the crook of Hyenwa's arm. Small, exploratory, the sound of someone newly acquainted with the world and still forming opinions about it. Across the sitting room, Jia was making a similar assessment from mine, her face doing the complicated, unguarded work of infancy, cycling through expressions that hadn't yet learned to be anything other than exactly what they were. Kong Jiho. Kong Jia. Born 3 weeks early at 2:47 in the morning. Both of them announced to the world with the specific urgency of people who had decided the schedule didn't suit them. Perfectly healthy. Impossibly small. Named in the hallway outside the delivery room while Hyunwoo sat on a plastic chair with his head in his hands and his shoulders shaking, and I had understood, watching him, that this was the 3rd time. Seobin was asleep on the sitting room couch. He had refused to leave the hospital. He had then refused to leave the house. He was currently face down in a cushion with one arm hanging off the edge and a baby blanket pulled over him that was designed for a significantly smaller person. And he was snoring in a way that suggested he had not slept properly in 3 days, which was accurate. This was the first quiet morning. We stayed in it, Hyunwoo and I on opposite ends of the room, each holding a twin, not speaking, the silence between us the good kind that doesn't need filling. He looked up from Jiho's face and found me already looking. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. We didn't need to. The library commission came through in the spring. A public branch in a neighborhood that had been waiting 12 years for one, commissioned through Kim and Kong with a brief that asked for something that felt alive. Hyunwoo brought it to me directly, which caused a brief recalibration among the senior team until they looked at my portfolio and stopped recalibrating. My name went on the architectural drawings beside his. Not underneath, not in smaller text, beside the way collaborators are credited, because that was what we were. The staff who had gone careful on that first morning after the article had, over the months, simply become colleagues. People adjusted when they understood that the situation was not temporary and not a performance. It took time. It was not without awkwardness. But architecture is a long-form discipline, and so it turned out was everything else worth building. Seobin showed up unannounced at the estate on 17 separate occasions in the 6 months following the twins' birth, which I know because I counted after the 15th and then kept counting out of a kind of fond bewilderment. He had a bag he kept packed for it. He taught Jiho to make a specific sound that was not quite a word and not quite a syllable, and was somehow already annoying in a way that suggested it would become more annoying as Jiho's range developed. He taught Jia to grab fingers with a grip that startled people. He stayed too long every time and left only when he was genuinely needed elsewhere, and sometimes not even then. He was slowly and visibly, and at some cost to the armor he'd been wearing for 6 years, becoming a son again rather than a satellite. I watched it happen over dinners that ran late and mornings after unannounced stays, in the way he and Hyunwoo had started talking. Not the careful, logistical exchanges of two people maintaining a relationship through its formal structure, but actual conversation, unscheduled, sometimes about nothing, sometimes about everything that had been left unsaid for too long. Hyunwoo had learned to call first. Seobin had learned to answer. Hyunwoo himself was learning things that surprised him. He was learning to leave the office before 8, which his assistant had noted in a tone of barely contained vindication. He was learning that "I missed you" was a sentence that could be said plainly, in the kitchen, without preamble or strategic framing, and that it landed better that way than any prepared version would have. He was learning to be soft in moments that didn't require him to be anything. Saturday mornings, the hour before the twins woke, the drive home from a long day, when he reached across the center console and put his hand over mine without making it mean anything more than what it was. He was learning to let things be simple. It did not come naturally. I found it remarkable every time. We married in the garden of the house we had built on the land he had shown me in the 2nd week. The property with the stream and the mountains and the perfect building site that had waited 10 years for someone to see it clearly. Jaiwoo had seen it clearly. The house had taken 7 months and bore both our sensibilities in a way that was sometimes in tension and always ultimately right. Large windows. Materials that belonged to the land. A room for Siobhan that he claimed he didn't need and occupied constantly. The wedding was small. Mountain backdrop, garden ceremony, the kind of afternoon that arrives perfectly without having been asked to. I wore white hanbok. Hyunwoo wore black and looked, as he always did, like he had been built for exactly the space he was standing in. Jiho and Ja were present in the arms of their respective grandmothers, both of them dressed in miniature formal, where that Siobhan had selected and that I had pretended to have opinions about. Siobhan, as best man, had been crying since 10 in the morning. He was attempting to hide this with limited success and complete commitment. By the time he stood to give his toast, his eyes were red in a way that no amount of composed posture could address, and he looked at us both for a moment before he started speaking. Just looked, and what was in his face was something I didn't have a word for. Relief and grief and joy all occupying the same space. The expression of someone who has arrived somewhere they didn't know they were going and recognizes it completely. He raised his glass. "I used to think my father and my best friend were the two most separate parts of my life," he said. "And then I realized they were always two halves of the same thing, and it took them falling in love for me to understand what our family was supposed to look like. Unconventional. Complicated. Absolutely, completely ours." He paused, steadying. "Jaiwa challenges my father to be present, to live fully, to be the man he always was underneath the grief. And my father gives Jaiwa the ground to stand on, stability, love, the certainty of being chosen completely. They make each other whole. And they made me believe again, in second chances, in love that doesn't follow rules, in the idea that family is what you build, not just what you're born into." He looked at the twins, asleep against their grandmother's shoulders. "Please raise your glasses. To my father. To my best friend. To Jiho and Ja, who have no idea yet how loved they already are. And to the beautiful, unconventional, absolutely perfect family we somehow became." The house was quiet by 10. The twins were asleep. Siobhan's snoring was already audible from the guest room. The same snoring, the same guest room, everything in its right place. Hyunwoo and I stood in our bedroom with the mountain dark outside the windows and the particular stillness of a day that had contained everything and was finally done. "What are you thinking about?" he said. "That gas station bathroom," I said. "The two pink lines. How terrified I was. How impossible all of this seemed. And now," I turned to face him. This man, twice my age, steady as load-bearing stone, still learning to be soft and surprised by himself every time he managed it. Mine. Completely, officially mine. Now I think some things are only impossible until they're built. We built something impossible. We built a home. We built a life, he corrected, pulling me close, his voice low and certain in the way it was when he had decided something and meant it completely. "And Jaiwoo, we are just getting started. One night. That is all it took. One night in a borrowed hotel room with a stranger who smelled like cedar and everything I was never supposed to want. And I spent the rest of my life building everything that came after it. The house, the firm, the family, the twins who have their father's eyes and my stubborn heart. And Siobhan down the hall, who chose love over everything easier, and gave us both the space to do the same. I wouldn't change a single second. Not one.